Anytime I talk about the Civil War monuments in Baltimore, it reminds me of what a difficult place Baltimore City was leading up to the Civil War. The earliest monument that was dedicated is the Confederate Soldiers and Sailors Monument. The next one to be unveiled was the Union Soldiers and Sailors Monument, the formal state monument. It's much grander. It's quite a difference when you begin to look at them and compare them. You get some insight into what it must have been like to live in Baltimore during that time. Maryland was one of the border states, so it was very important to Lincoln to have Maryland remain on the side of the Union, because otherwise the capital, his capital, the Union capital, would be surrounded by Confederate states. However, that did not preclude a large segment of the population having Southern sympathies. Brothers, cousins, uncles, families, were divided by this. And I think it was particularly difficult in Maryland. But when you look at the Union Soldiers and Sailors Monument, the appropriation for which was approved in the legislature in 1906, 3 years after the Confederate Soldiers and Sailors Monument was dedicated, it is grand, it is celebratory. There's a sense of optimism in that grouping of three figures on the top of this grand base. There's the young, handsome citizen soldier leaving his anvil and plow behind him, and he's buckling on his uniform, and his cape is blowing away from him, and he is accompanied by Victory on his right and Bellona, the god of war, on his left. And there's this powerful forward motion. There's just no question when you look at that monument what the outcome of the war was. And when you compare that to the very poignant, much smaller monument to the Confederate soldiers and sailors, the inscription on the front of that base is Gloria Victis, which means glory to the vanquished. And Glory, who is this very, very beautiful woman, angel, with wings that extend skyward in the most dramatic way, and she's very beautiful, and she's holding a dying, young, handsome man, a soldier, and he's just taken his last breath, one assumes, in her arms, and his standard points downward, and she holds a wreath high, but it's the wreath of history, not the wreath of victory. When that monument was dedicated, it was less than 40 years after the end of the Civil War. So the 2,000 or 3,000 people that attended had been personally touched by the war. And women were crying, and so were men, over the losses in that war. And so it was a very sad, thoughtful dedication, even though there was a big parade from the Washington Monument all the way up. I think what it tells us about those times in the early part of the new century is that while we think of the Civil War as history today, it was very much a part of people's lives then. And it also shows that the coals of civil strife die slowly.